The lipstick stain on his collar was the first clue. Crimson red, a shade I knew wasn't mine. It was subtle, almost invisible, but I saw it. The way she flinched when I asked about it confirmed my suspicions, a tiny flicker of guilt in her eyes before she masked it with practiced indifference. "Oh, this must be from work," she'd said, dismissing me with a wave of her hand. That's how it started. Small things. Late nights at the office, whispered phone calls, a new perfume I hadn't bought her. The subtle shifts in her behavior chipped away at my trust, like the steady drip of water eroding stone. We'd been married for 10 years, built a life together, and now it felt like she was dismantling it brick by brick, with a careless disregard that bordered on cruel. Denial is a powerful drug, and I clung to it for as long as I could. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the stress of work was getting to me. But the evidence kept mounting. The text messages I accidentally saw on her phone, the way she'd recoil from my touch, the lies that piled up like a twisted monument to our crumbling marriage. Then came the brazenness. She stopped trying to hide it. The late nights became overnight trips. The whispered phone calls became open conversations, laced with laughter and inside jokes I wasn't privy to. It was like she was flaunting her affair, daring me to confront her, to acknowledge the gaping hole she'd ripped in our lives. One night, she didn't come home at all. I sat in the dark, the silence amplifying the emptiness in our house, in my heart. That's when I decided I'd had enough. I wouldn't be a passive observer in the destruction of my own life. I needed to know. I needed to see. Tracking her wasn't difficult. She'd become so careless, so wrapped up in her new love, that she left a trail of breadcrumbs a mile wide. A quick search of her phone records, a few strategically placed questions to mutual acquaintances, and I had a name, an address, a face. Anthony. He was a colleague, a smooth-talking charmer with a predatory smile. I saw pictures of them together, laughing, holding hands, their faces pressed close. The images seared themselves into my memory, a constant reminder of my betrayal. My first instinct was rage, a primal urge to confront him, to inflict physical pain on the man who had stolen my wife. But raw anger wouldn't bring me satisfaction. I wanted something more, something that would cut deeper, something that would unravel their carefully constructed world of lies. I spent weeks meticulously planning my revenge. I wanted it to be precise, targeted, and devastating. I researched Anthony, learned everything I could about him. His habits, his insecurities, his deepest fears. And then I found it. The weak spot. Anthony was obsessed with his online reputation. He was a social media addict, meticulously crafting an image of success and happiness. He documented every aspect of his life, from his expensive meals to his exotic vacations, desperate for validation from strangers. That's where I would strike. I created a fake online profile, a fictitious woman named Jane. Over the course of several weeks, I built a rapport with Anthony, feeding his ego, mirroring his interests, pretending to be captivated by his charm. I gained his trust, became his confidant, his online lover. He poured his heart out to Jane, confessing his affair with my wife, boasting about their secret rendezvous, oblivious to the fact that he was pouring gasoline on his own pyre. The day the package arrived, I was across the street from Anthony's apartment, watching from my car. I'd sent it anonymously, a plain brown box containing a carefully curated collection of evidence, photos of him and my wife, intimate text messages, even a recording of one of their whispered phone calls. The piece de resistance was a printed copy of all his online conversations with Jane, revealing his infidelity to the world. I watched as Anthony opened the box, his face paling as he sifted through the contents. The realization of what was happening dawned on him slowly, like a cold dread creeping into his veins. He stumbled back into his apartment, the door slamming shut behind him. A few minutes later, my wife arrived. She was smiling, her eyes bright with anticipation. She unlocked the door and stepped inside, oblivious to the storm brewing within. The sound of her screams echoed through the building, a raw, primal cry of anguish. I didn't need to see inside to know what was happening. Anthony's carefully constructed world was crashing down around him, and my wife was caught in the wreckage. I didn't feel a sense of triumph, not exactly. It was more like a hollow ache, a confirmation of the devastating loss I'd already suffered. I started the car and drove away, leaving the wreckage behind. My marriage was over, but at least I had taken back some control, exposed the lies, and brought the darkness into the light. The next day, Anthony was fired from his job. His online reputation was in tatters, his carefully crafted image shattered. My wife tried to contact me, but I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. Our story was over. I packed my bags, left the house, and started to rebuild my life, piece by painful piece. The scars of betrayal would always remain, a reminder of the pain I had endured. But I had survived. I had faced the darkness and emerged on the other side, stronger, wiser, and determined to find happiness again. The silence in my new apartment was no longer deafening. It was peaceful, a blank canvas, waiting to be filled with new beginnings. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope.